Hi, everyone. So thank you for coming to our career development day. We're excited that you guys are all here. We also have drinks and refreshments outside if you want to go grab some water, but we'll get started. Okay, so we'll start with a land acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We are grateful to work, learn, and live on this land. Okay, so just a quick agenda today. We'll start with some opening remarks. We'll introduce our amazing panelists, and then we'll get into our discussion and Q&A, and then followed by the networking reception, where you guys, well, we'll have a little bit of treats and refreshments for you guys. So I am the VP students at the GSS. So at the Graduate Student Society, we represent our graduate student society or our graduate students, and we work on advocacy. We work on health and wellness resources. We do a lot of social events, and we also provide events like these ones for professional development. And this is our annual event, which is really gathered to hear from our experts, our alumnus, and our career experts and professionals to just provide some advice on navigating careers, post-graduation, and just trying to figure out what we can do with our degrees after graduation. As part of the VP students this year, we are really working on creating these networking opportunities for students to really engage our alumni, to help kind of support us to gather or to support and to provide guidance for career pathways, industry expectations, and how to really navigate post-graduation. So we had our first event this August, and then we'll have a second kind of more of like an informal networking event in February, and this will be mainly on sectors related to sustainability and clean energy. So if you're also interested in kind of those fields and what you can do with your degree in those type of sectors, that would also be an event in February that you could attend. And now I will pass it along to the host to introduce our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. I guess this microphone is not really working. Yeah, so my name is Joshua. Thank you all for coming. And I want to thank the panelists for coming as well, sharing their time with us and experience. And I would like to introduce Dr. Leila Haddad, Dr. Andre Masawi, and Julian Jagdeo, who are here to share with us their knowledge and their experience. So if you want to like to get started, Dr. Andre. Oh, sorry? Perhaps first. Yeah, we can start with Leila. So please, thank you. You have the floor.
Hi, I'm definitely not a doctor, so no, that's okay. Maybe one day. My name is Leila Haddad. I use the pronouns she and they. I am a recent graduate from the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs here at UBC. I currently work as a policy analyst with the Lil'wat First Nation up north in Mount Currie. My specialization was with social development, change management, people processes, and just human rights in general. Was that all you needed?
Yeah, just a brief introduction, and then you can pass it.
Hi, I'm Julianne Jagdeo. Pronouns are she, her. I currently work as a knowledge translation and exchange specialist at the BC Centre for Disease Control. So basically what that means is they have information that they need to get to people, and I help them get it in the most efficient and effective way possible. Before that, I worked a bit in the nonprofit sector as well. Yeah, I graduated from UBC in 2017 from the Faculty of Medicine. I did a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry, so very different to what I'm doing right now. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks very much to the GSS for the invitation. My name is Andre Mazawi, and I've been at UBC for the last 25 years or so in the Department of Educational Studies down the road. I'm a sociologist by training and education, and specializing in education, sociology of education, which is a subfield of sociology. Currently, this is my fifth, happily also my last year as head of department. So yes, I survived. Anyway, I've been here, and it's a pleasure to be able to share with you whatever insight I bring. I only hope, my colleagues here have graduated recently. I come from the prehistory of academia, so it's a little bit old time, but I'll try to say things that make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your great introductions. And now we can move on to the Q&A section. I will begin by asking some of the general questions that are for all speakers. And you can start answering in the same order as you give your introductions. So the first question is, what skills do you consider most essential for your success in your sector?
I think that's a great question. I think for the skills in my sector, working with people, working on human rights, working to advance equity, diversity, inclusion, Indigenous sovereignty and governance, you need the skills that you might not think a graduate student would say. The things that I would say would be being able to have respect and humility, to learn about, respect and humility to identify what you might not know and the things that you might need to work on. You need to have good communication skills, which I'm sure my other panelists will talk about, being able to communicate complex ideas and narrowing them down and being able to translate them and communicate them in an accessible way. It's about being able to look beyond yourself, being able to look for other groups and the other gaps, being able to have the ability to have different perspectives and step outside into maybe another person's shoes to try to identify the experiences that they might be living. Listening skills is another big one. being able to listen and going beyond just hearing, but actually listening what people are saying, listening about their actual experiences, their lived experiences that you might not have ever experienced or heard of even. In the field that I'm working with, there's a lot of hard skills that are necessary: organization, research, policy writing. But the true skills that I feel like you need to have in this field is being able to connect with another human being, being able to put yourself out there to tell them that you are there to listen to them, to welcome their ideas, their perspectives, things like that.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything you said. Maybe I'll add, like for me, my role, I'm kind of like an internal consultant within the organization. So there's definitely a skill set that comes from like research evidence that definitely supports my ability to do my job. But also on top of that, I think what helps me to be more successful is to approach my role as to be in service to my colleagues, to help them, to meet them where they're at with the resources and time that they have, and also to be dependable. To if I say, oh, I'm going to do this by this deadline, meet that deadline, because that is not as common as a trait that people have that you would expect. But if your colleagues can trust you, you'll go a long way.
I agree with the first two comments. Absolutely. I think the dependability and the listening, the capacity to listen, that's absolutely central. As banal a platitude as the word listening sounds, it's one of the most difficult things to learn to do. That's one. But the skill that I would say, it might surprise some, that one needs to be able to handle is dealing with our wounds that we bring into the workplace. And what I mean by that, that careers and developing them do not happen in a limbo. They're not a computer programming device that are absolutely pristine and logically evolving. We bring all our life experiences, whatever happened to us. Painful moments we have been subjected to, discrimination, racism, whatnot. How do we deal with them? Do we come into a place as bitter persons, or do we learn not to reproduce and amplify wounds and then generalize them into new situations, which would not be very productive? So on top of listening and dependability, I would also emphasize the importance of dealing with one's history, with one's wounds, and how one would like to learn from a work experience in ways that are conducive of healing development towards relationality. That's the point that Leila spoke to. And often, relationality is impacted by preconceptions, or not even preconceptions, pre-experiences before our stepping into a particular place. And so it is very important to be aware that we don't come tabula rasa. We bring lots of things. And therefore, how we engage them is important.
Thank you very much. The second question that we have is also general for all the speakers, and that is, how did you navigate your career path to get to your current role?
Good question. So I have been passionate about about human rights since I was, I guess, an undergrad. I took any volunteering opportunities that I possibly could have. It also comes from like self-interest and my identity. I'm Lebanese, and it's something that I hold very close to me. I saw your cedar of Lebanon right there. But that was something I saw I didn't really see in my community in university. It was something that I wanted to address, a gap that I noticed that I wanted to make sure other people didn't experience. So I started with volunteer work. It started with going beyond my capacity at the time and putting myself in situations in which I was very uncomfortable, in which I was very new, but I knew that I could grow in these situations. Um, in my graduate career, that was translated into putting myself in classes that I was very like I didn't really have much knowledge in already, but I wanted to learn. That was looking to network in different ways with professors, putting myself out there with people that very much intimidated me, but that I knew I could learn a great deal from. So relationships with my professors really helped propel me into this world. Looking at internships and co-ops, I did a co-op with the Government of Canada through my program, which I'm very grateful for. And I realized quickly that the government was not what I wanted to work for. But that helped me. I took a chance, and I took a chance working for government, even though I knew that that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And I learned about the machinery of the government. I learned a little bit more how people are working on the inside. And I took that and I realized, and I said, okay, now I want to help people that the government is trying to help, but maybe not quite getting at. So it was taking opportunities, doing things that I wasn't really comfortable with, doing things that made me step out of my comfort zone. And I have quite a big comfort zone, but being able to just put myself in a situation where I know I can learn a lot. I think also something about coming into my role, it's about being open-minded and being okay with being uncomfortable and doing these things that you have never done before. Networking is also obviously a big one, I mentioned it, but talking to as many people as possible. In your graduate class, when you're in classes, you're not just learning from your professors, you are learning from every peer around you. Every perspective, every idea, and every opinion they have will inform you moving forward.
I think for me, I never really had a career trajectory, but I kind of had a general sense of where I wanted to go next. So I really tried to leverage my current opportunities that I had to get to the next step. So like even when I was entering my PhD in life sciences, I knew I didn't want to stay in the lab. So, I kind of leveraged the flexibility and relative freedom that you get in grad school to volunteer with the Graduate Student Society. I did an informal policy project with the Ministry of Health that I got through connections. And then all that volunteer work and extracurricular activities got me to my first job out of grad school, which was at Genome, British Columbia, which is technically a nonprofit organization, but they fund a lot of research. So they sit at the intersection of applied research. So then with that, I leveraged that opportunity to get more experience translating that research to different audiences. They had a pretty generous professional development budget. So I leveraged that to pay for most of a certificate program in knowledge mobilization, which then has led me to get the current job that I have now. So yeah, it's like making the most of your current situation to get to the next step.
I think navigating is a very hazardous process. It's not linear. I myself never wanted to become an academic, never thought of it. I had nobody in my family who had ever done it, or even in my neighborhood. And it was not a preconceived kind of process. I actually wanted to go to a completely different direction. I wanted to work in the diplomatic field, because I think a consular field, more particularly, because I thought it was the most noble of traditions, like if you read Greek philosophy, etc. Work in diplomacy, if you do it in earnest, but it never happened, partly because I didn't find the government to represent decently. But things happen. And I think my colleague here on the panel, my two colleagues, indicated it. Whatever experience comes your way, take it seriously and leverage it. There is no experience that is lost. And that capacity to translate experiences from one domain to the other is a very important navigational tool. It's not a compass, because often you don't know the direction, but it gives you capacities to know yourself a little bit better, what you can do, what you cannot do, and it helps you develop ideas that you can translate from one domain to the other in creative ways. So I would say the most important aspect of navigating your life is to be open to the experiences that you encounter, but think carefully how you can also translate them from one domain to the other. That's a very important aspect. All the rest, I would argue, are just details of that attitude.
Can I add something as well?
Yeah.
I think my panelists said it, my co-panelists said it really, really well. And I think just adding on, looking at the things that you might not know, what I did this past year, even looking for jobs and spending my summers, like spending basically a full-time job looking for a job. I also took the opportunity to do certificates and like develop my skills in things that I didn't have the opportunity to, but I found really interesting that might be able to propel me into a different field. So in policy, we look at like very kind of rigid structures, like government at this, at that, but I wanted to expand my field. So I had some friends who were in the geography program, and I learned about GIS, which is like a mapping geography, human geography mapping software, something that I know that in order to get hired by the United Nations, they really, really want this technical expertise that we don't get taught in university in this program. So it's also about looking for those things, looking at the jobs that you might want, looking at the potential careers and chatting with those people and asking them how they got there and what skills they think they might have needed in order to get to another job, for example. So looking at different certificates, different options, trying to expand your knowledge based on your personal interests, not really what might help you in that job even, but what am I interested in that I can start specializing in myself and be that person that people will want.
To be patient is the most important kind of, to be patient with oneself is very important for that kind of attitude. Not to rush things. When you rush, you don't really get to know yourself. Knowing oneself is very important. But the only way to know it is to test it. And that's exactly what my fellow panelists.
Thank you all so much. Those are really insightful answers. Now, the next question is also for the three of you, and I think it will help us lead into the more specific like industry sector that we're going to go into after this question. So the question is, what advice would you give to graduate students looking to enter your field?
I feel like I've spoken quite a bit about this, kind of the same ideas. But in my field specifically, I would say, I don't know if my fellow panelists will agree, but it's my field, you're working for vulnerable populations that the government is meant to represent the majority. It's meant to represent all of Canadians in a one-size-fits-all type of format. But in our field, my field, you realize that a one-size-fits-all format does not work out. A one-size-fits-all format actually will harm the populations, the vulnerable groups, the Indigenous people, the youth, the immigrants and migrants and the refugees. One-size-fits-all doesn't work. And so you need to be able to learn, you need to be able to work twice as hard to maybe feel like you're getting similar results in another field, for example. It's about being able to, deal with the daily challenges and the pushbacks. And even in my role, I learned about colonialism against Indigenous people, and I saw it, and you see it still today. But I really, really learned about it when I got to my job and when I started working, and I started realizing what we see is not actually the truth. So it's about being able to work twice as hard to figure out what that truth is, what that gap is. And it's about being able to, like I said, put yourself put yourself in someone else's shoes and and trying to look at different perspectives to see how that could, I got distracted for a second. I'm so sorry. I'm also neurodivergent, so like everything is, yeah. But that's what I would just say, being able to recognize that like each day will be a challenge, but you're ultimately working with a team of people. You're working for other people to make their life just a little bit better.
I mean, I totally agree. I think gathering that community insight is also important in the world that I live in or work in, sorry. Because if you can, so like in my role, I'm there to help my colleagues at work get public health information to the people who need to hear it. So if I can better understand what barriers people face in like, accessing, like, for example, healthcare, I will be able to better do my job. So don't discount the impact of volunteer work and getting in your community. In addition to that, like I did a certificate program through the University of Guelph in knowledge mobilization, which did cost money. There are some free courses available online as well. I know the Center for Implementation has a free program called Inspiring Change, which has a lot of, it's a good place to start setting your foundation and some of the research evidence that informs my field. I'm speaking for people who aren't doing a graduate degree in implementation science or knowledge translation, which some of you may be, then you're ahead of me. But yeah, there are some free resources available to you as well as things that cost money to do that. And yeah, volunteering and, you know, like I leverage what you have. I worked at the intersection of research and the practical world, the real world. So, okay, how can I do knowledge translation this way? Okay, well, I have this research evidence. Let me write up that in a way so I can share that with like a general public audience. Like find what opportunities you can take within your current opportunities that you have. And if you don't have an opportunity, make one. That's another thing I did. I started a nonprofit organization because I didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to learn science policy. So I created one.
Yeah, I think this is the benefit of being the last speaker in any question, because you tend to agree with your predecessors. Anyway, my domain is broadly defined education. So this is what I'm going to be talking about, is how to navigate a career in the field of education. Education is a very diverse field. It could be from higher education, and within higher education, what do you want to do? Mainly teach, do research, direct a lab. Do you want to work in a school, to work in adult education? So it's a very varied set of experiences that are open to you. However, to my humble opinion, working in any aspect of education, whether it is about research or working in schools, means that you have actually gone through the material experience of communities and people in specific places. Thinking about education as a philosophical concept will lead nowhere. The question then becomes, how do you build that material experience? And I think my predecessors exactly pinned it down. You create for yourself opportunities. It could be from generating your own circles of activities in your neighborhood and community. It could be volunteering in schools. It is showing that you have a practical material knowledge of educational settings, whatever these settings are. That is the matter that you will reflect on and try then to leverage into research ideas, into projects that you would like to implement, etc. But thinking, because I'm going to read the best 10 books on education, that I'll be really brilliant in my field and would open all the opportunities, my humble opinion is that this is going to be very rare. Let's put it this way. And those who really know what they're talking about are those who really took the time to build up their experience in a particular field. Any field. We can be talking about medicine. We can be talking about government. It is one thing to be the minister who has no experience of anything below, if so to speak, I say, or to be a to talk about education as researchers, but never had the chance to sense what a classroom is, what a community setting is. At the end of the day, the shaky nature of your knowledge will be very apparent. And so I think that one needs to build the plane as one is driving it or flying it or whatever it is, the metaphor, or navigating the ship as one is building it. And you construct your own career by actually allowing yourself to go through the experiences that gain you the insights into what it is and the complexity of this experience.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move into the industry-specific questions. So this first question is from the government sector. So for Leila, what are some impactful projects that you've worked on, and what made them successful?
That's a good question. There's one big project that I'm working on, and that is helping the nation reform their on-reserve income assistance program. Can you repeat the full question, sorry?
Yeah, sure, no worries. What are some impactful projects you've worked on, and what made them successful?
Okay, I'm still in the beginning of working on this project, so but I can say what I think will make it successful. So I'm helping this First Nation, hopefully in an innovative field. It is an innovative field, but reforming their on-reserve income assistance program to create a formula, whether it's a funding formula or a rate-based formula based on what the community needs are. For this to be successful, I need to also acknowledge that I am not Indigenous. I am not from this community, and I'm coming as an outsider, so to speak, but I am not presenting myself as an outsider when I'm there. I know that's kind of a little bit of a complex thing, but I will speak a lot more about the social aspect rather than like the actual rigid structures and policies and projects like that. But working for a government such as the one that I'm working for, it's about being able to kind of recognize what you bring into this space, how my Lebanese identity is very similar in some ways. The culture is very similar to an Indigenous culture. Once we can into the Litwa culture specifically, once I can kind of recognize that, that's when I can start working on the project, working on understanding what the community actually needs. I personally will not be working with the individual income assistance recipients, for example. I'll be working with other community members, other Litwa Nation members, to help facilitate those conversations based on trust, based on understanding. What will make this project successful will be being able to actually listen to the community, because at the end, we're going to be presenting all of our recommendations to Chief and Council. These are representatives of the entire nation. Litwa is also the third biggest nation in BC. They are a full-on government. They have resources, they have funding, they have different department models and different structures, but it's very unique to the nation. And that's also something that we need to understand. Being able to bridge the gap between Canadian government and federal government and provincial government policy to Indigenous and First Nation culture and traditions. So being able to bridge that gap and bring these two together in a way that we're not pushing aside Indigenous values and Litwa values, but we're actually trying to figure out a way to promote these and make these the priority while also incorporating other fields of government. It's a nice little challenge, but there are ways to do it. And that's by just realizing what the similarities are and what that main priority is and tackling that. So the project has not completed. It's a 2-year project, and that's what my contract is for. But there are, to make it successful, it's thinking about, it's thinking about the big picture, but also being able to position yourself to really understand what the big issue is. Oh, you have a question.
So this question is now for the nonprofit sector. And how do you manage funding and sustainability in your organization?
I mean, yeah, nonprofit is a bit tricky in the sense that you're constantly looking for funding. And so at least when I worked at Genome BC, we were lucky enough to get provincial funding. But you know, a part of the way we needed to show that we were successful is like, look, I can take every dollar the province gives, I can leverage that to get 3 or 4 additional dollars to bring into our organization. So that's one way that they showed success. Also, like the number of projects they funded, how many publications came out of that, how many presentations came out of that, how many programs did the organization deliver, and the number of audiences that they reached, and how far across BC were they able to reach. It's those kind of metrics that were gathered year to year and published every single year to show, like, look, this is the value that we contribute to society. Are there ways that they could have broadened those metrics? Yes, but I think unfortunately with a nonprofit organization that kind of relied a lot on provincial funding, we had to kind of stick to some of those more traditional metrics and evaluation standards to show like, hey, we are still of value, so keep giving us money. So it's a little bit of a tricky field to navigate. Yeah, there's pros and cons in working in nonprofit. You get a lot of freedom and flexibility to do things, but you know, you need people to give you money to help pay your staff, to help do the things that you want to do. So it's a balancing act.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to move on to a question for the education sector for Dr. Mazawi. How can graduate students contribute meaningfully to education reform or innovation?
Well, that's a powerful question, and I think I would like to answer it in a very positive way. A lot. When I say graduate students, I'm talking about, of course, MA, MEd, particularly PhD, doctoral students, or students who are doing their doctoral research but coming from the sector itself, practitioners. One should not discount or belittle the possible impact of what graduate students can initiate. Throughout my professional life, I've seen that repeatedly. Sometimes on an individual level, somebody comes with an idea that is very powerful and develops it. But sometimes it's the work of a group, of a team of graduate students who come together. Secondly, I think it depends a lot on the department in which you do your graduate education. And by that I mean, this is where you need, if I may, be paternalistic a little bit, old style of way of speaking, to say, once you choose your area, you choose your department, which is the particular manifestation of the skills prevalent in your area. You should consider how that department works, what kind of pedagogies they employ. It's very important because the kind of pedagogies deployed or employed would impact how you will be exposed to your field. So when we speak about education research and reforms, it is one thing if I go to a department where the prevalent style of teaching is lecturing and reading papers. And it's a different thing if I know that in that department, actually, professors employ, for instance, the lab concept. or a lab model in which they recruit students to their respective groups and actually make them part of the reforms they are working on with the ministry, with school districts, with communities, etc. That makes a big difference. And I think anyone interested in education should, or developing themselves in the field of education, should by all means not just say, oh, this department has a great reputation. Yeah, we might be in the sky. For those who teach there, they have made their careers. Most of us would be close to the expiry date of our validity. That's fine. But think about yourself. What are you going to get from these flying stars? So to look at how departments actually offer experiences to students is absolutely important. And there are methods of working with graduate students that carry with them the potential already at a very early stage of your career to be able to be exposed to areas of knowledge, to methodologies of research, to connections in the field, to participation in reforms, whether at a school level, whether at a community level, or sometimes a professor is or a team of professors are commissioned to work on a national reform or provincial reform. Look for these places, because if you could insert yourself into these teams, you really, to my humble opinion, you've hit the pot jack. Pot jack, you say? Yeah, jackpot. Well, I'm not from that field. Anyway, the jackpot. Look for these places. Do not rely only on what appears to be in the McLean rankings, which is the most reputable, whatever it is, institution. Go into the details of how things are done. And I've seen many times researchers, graduate students originating from quite local institutions that have had that experience so powerfully that they can leverage a career which is much more transformative and powerful in terms of the effect of the work they do than in reputable institutions, large department, where the ratio of time available per student declines by definition. So look at these things, inquire, ask peers in the department, ask students or alumni of the department, look at their programs, look at the activities, both the courses, but also out of course activities. That would give you enough sense how much you have a possibility to become part of the larger process and not just be there as a student. Be there as a student, but be there as a student with an actual effective opportunity to participate in things of the big world, things that you will become eventually and hopefully part of.
Thank you so much, Dr. Razawi. Now I have another question for Leila, and that is, how do you handle bureaucracy while trying to innovate or implement change?
How do I handle bureaucracy when trying to implement change? That's a really good question. The reality is you're always going to be encountering bureaucracy, whatever field you work in. And wow, I take some time with this. It's something that I get frustrated by, that I have held too personally, I think, for me. Something that I get angry by, something that used to kind of fuel my work because of the frustration that I experience. Bureaucracy is great for some people, but it's not great for the majority of folks who don't benefit from a larger system of one size fits all. At first, I kind of let that anger fuel my work, fuel my passion, and against bureaucracy, against the idea that a program or a process is implemented because it helps people who already benefit from the system and they're making the decisions. But now, working for a First Nation, or with a First Nation rather, Um, I've just understood that that is just part of the process. These people, this First Nation, has always encountered colonialism, racism, discrimination in the system that's embedded and foundational to the larger system, the larger Canadian system. And it's about being able to kind of move forward, understanding that. But like I said before, being able to bridge the gap, take from one field, take one from one group that might seem totally opposite to the other, and try to find those commonalities, because there are those commonalities. In the end, the main priority is the common good. That's the priority for the Canadian government, for example. It's also the priority for the First Nation, the common good for that community. So as myself, not being First Nations, not being Indigenous, and working with the community, I need to understand, or I understood that anger, there was no place for that anger in that field. There was a place for me being able to use my privilege and my position to bridge that gap and to kind of create a space where other people could be angry, if that makes sense. I was in a position where my job is to look at the facts, to look at the processes, to look at the needs and the strategic plans of the nation, to understand what their government is trying to do, and trying to find the easiest way possible to get to that solution without this nation having to, I guess, compromise on their rights or their commitments or what they really care about. That's my responsibility in trying to bridge the two and trying to find that kind of commonality.
Yeah, of course.
Were you planning to move to the next?
I was just gonna say that, for the sake of time, I was just gonna ask one last question from this general bank, and then I was gonna open it up for anyone in the audience in case they had any more general questions. However, we will also have the networking, the networking part starting at 6, in which everyone is gonna be able to come talk to you guys more personally, and ask questions. But if you have, something to add, by all means.
Thank you. I agree. I mean, the frustration and anger about bureaucracy is notable, and no discussion, disagreement. But I would like to say something very important, especially as we are talking about career development. In the field of sociology and economics, actually, the term bureaucracy was never perceived as a negative thing in itself. I mean, if you look at the work of Max Weber, a German guy who passed away in 1920 something, I don't remember, doesn't matter. For him, bureaucracy was the reflection, the manifestation of the highest form of logical organization of a society or any field of activity. That today we attribute to the term bureaucracy in negative sense. Most people use it in that sense, oh, it's bureaucracy. Just shows how much the area or the way we do things have actually degenerated into endless forms of control and supervision, etc. So that shift is interesting. But what I would like to say about this, never underestimate bureaucracy in the sense of established rules. And let me explain. I'm not a conformist, not at all. If you are thinking about your careers, know how your bureaucracy works. Know the policy inside out. Knowing the policies and knowing how the bureaucracy works is literally a form of literacy. Is a literacy, like knowing to read the page I was sent by the GSS. Literally. If you dismiss it entirely, some people do it, fantastic. But then you might be losing actually on leverages. to change things. Because I can tell you one thing after all these years, there is not one bureaucracy, not even UBC, where it's a hermetically closed system. And then you must go through this way. I often realize that actually the better you know the bureaucracy, the do and don't, the regulations, the policies, you can leverage them each against each other in view of opening pathways that you are not able to do. Remember that. I'm not endorsing regulation and supervision. That's not my point. And I don't want to be understood, because many times I go out of these kinds of events and people misunderstand. I'm not doing that out of conformism. I'm just saying, if you work in an organization like UBC, like a school, like a government, like a non-profit organization, know the policies, know the ways of doing inside out, but with a spirit that you can use that knowledge to work out spaces for activism and transformation and change. And argue them, unless you want to degenerate into shouting and protesting and becoming a bitter individual. That's not an aspect. It's not an option. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, no,
I
that,
didn't say that, but it's possible to stretch it in that direction. Because we need to recognize there are limitations nonetheless at the end of the day. But don't give up even the small tools that you have to be able to do something with. And you can always find a way to do something. We don't have time to give examples.
I agree with what he says.
Thank you.
You need to know how the sausage is made so you can make a different sausage.
All right, thank you. So now I would like to open the floor to the audience. If there are any questions that you have that have arisen throughout this panel, if you have any questions, feel free. The floor is yours.
You moved from BNB to like you moved from BNB to like a nonprofit or where you're working now. Did you see any skill gaps at the time, and how did you address that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. After I finished, because I did a master's before, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And my partner at the time, he gave me a book. It's like, what do you want to do with your degree? That, I think that was the title of the book, literally. And it helped give me a little insight into kind of like thinking about the next step in terms of that kind of thinking. And so like I always knew going into my PhD, I didn't want to stay in the lab. So it's like, okay, I need to leverage my current skill sets, which is like pipetting stuff in a petri dish and tissue culture, to get my foot in the door. Okay, but then now that I got my foot in the door, how can I get all those extra things that I knew I wasn't going to get in the lab, but there was volunteering at the GSS. Okay, what kind of skills could I leverage there? Advocacy work, learning how to influence bureaucracy by understanding how it works, because it's definitely present at a university. And yeah, so I that was definitely some of the ways I identified some of those skill gaps, and then looking at what opportunities were available around me. And you do get quite a bit of freedom in your graduate studies to kind of skirt off in the middle of the day and run a council meeting, or run for Senate or something like that. So yeah, take advantage of it. I'm more of an ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of person.
Are there any other questions from the audience? If we,
I'm wondering
what you would suggest to someone who does not come from a health background, but rather from, for instance, social sciences background and is interested in doing either research or engagement and working with, I should be more specific, sorry, to work to make research more impactful, but maybe specifically in a public health field. What would you suggest because, for instance, public health is such a vastly different field than anthropology, for instance. I'm wondering what you would suggest as a skill set or further training.
So you're coming at this from the perspective of an anthropology student who is interested in more of that translating, helping facilitate translating that public health knowledge to a broader audience. Well, like, I wouldn't get so hung up on the fact that your background doesn't necessarily come from public health, because mine didn't. But it's more the skill set of taking complex text and making it understandable so that my mother knows what I'm talking about. And there are ways you can show it, like even if, yeah, you don't have opportunity to volunteer at an organization and do some communications work there, even like writing your own blog or something like that. Nobody has to see it, but you're building your portfolio so that when you apply for those jobs, like, look, this is what I can do. So yeah, I wouldn't get so hung up on the topic. It's more the skills in order to do that. Bringing volunteering for community organizations, facilitating communication between two different people, two different groups. That's a skill set, which is one of the things that I did when I was doing my nonprofit organization. So we ran events and we tried to do a variety of different events, like panel discussions, but also like there was like kind of like a speed dating event or a round table, different kind of, or people kind of more closer communications with other people. So like where you can be a little bit more creative, and it didn't matter what the topic was, but it was just more the process itself and the technique that you can focus on, not the topic.
We still have a couple more minutes left, and I would to take advantage of that time. I also want to invite those of us who are joining online. If anyone has a question, we can answer it right now. If not, you guys can also all reach out to our panelists later if you have any more specific questions, even beyond the networking event. But this is more for those of us who for everyone who is online. They're not going to have a chance to have these like networking one-on-one. So if they have other questions, I would invite them to ask them. And if not, we can move on with maybe one or two more questions from the audience.
This is the first speaker. Actually, I had a question for Dr. Marcel. You said that you were professionally interested in going to professor route.
Yes.
You didn't have connection in your family. So you can speak on the resources who in your community or your circles did you go to that advice? We have this. What did you have?
We had what?
So we have events like this.
Right.
Who did you go to? What did you learn?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very I would say that's a fantastic question, but it would require digging into one's biography. But it is very important. At the time, I'm talking about almost half a century ago, right? Makes a difference. It was a different world. There was very little things to work with. But there is also at the same time, and I'm talking for myself, I'm not giving, actually, I felt a little bit uncomfortable contributing any insights into today's event because it is an important event. Perhaps, one's age and reference points are such that perhaps it's better not to harm young people with advice that came from before the French Revolution. Anyway, yeah, but what I would say is that capacity to work with nothing. And I would like to explain what I mean. And I would argue that actually, even today, in the midst of a city like Vancouver, a campus like UBC, with all the facilities, the technology, and whatnot, not everyone has a clear idea where you want to navigate, where you want to go. And you should be able to think through that in ways where almost, I would say, if you know the famous story, I mean, famous for some, of the Baron Munchausen, who was able to stretch himself out of the drowning in the mud by pulling on his own hair, he said. And in many ways, we all, each one of us, find ourselves in this or that situation in life, in similar situations. For me, the biggest asset that I ever had, and I'm still practicing it, is my hobby. Was or is my hobby, basically. And my hobby was very simple. It didn't require much. Forgive the sin, but I still collect stamps. Yeah, but I want to say, in my context, stamps provided me with the encyclopedia that I never had. It provided me with languages and knowledge about places and people and events. There was no internet, I said about what period I'm talking. So collecting stamps with passion, because I just happened to run into somebody who introduced me to it. And I took it. It didn't mean much. It didn't require really any investment of money. These were all canceled stamps. You just exchange them, you find them on letters, whatever comes your way, envelopes that are thrown in the street. These became assets. And even after all these years, for me, in my teaching, often they inform examples I give, exercises I do, assignments I work on, or even thematics that I present. And so that's an example of things that might be insignificant at the time, but actually you can build it to become a powerhouse about things that don't come to your mind now, but might serve you later. The leveraging principle that we were talking about earlier. So even in the here and now of the campus, think about resources that nobody is looking at. And how you can actually transform them into powerhouses in some way that could help you leverage things, right? That's what I can say without going now into full detail of stories that might not be so interesting and helpful. Yes, so not to discard your experiences if you run into something, and keep your mind open on things and work hard, quite frankly. Hard work is inevitable in all of this. In building yourself is exactly that career. The career has a pre-requirement, is building yourself in the attitude, dispositions, values that you want to develop. These are not given. In retrospect, I can speak to it, but actually, I would say, don't look for shortcuts, because shortcuts are destructive. And if I may indulge 1 minute, actually, and I will stop, oblige myself to stop. I meet that every day in my work when I need to proceed to disciplinary action because students did all kinds of things. I hear stories and I come across events. I can tell you the common denominator, shortcuts. you are caught, trapped in a corner. No time, no this, no that. Okay, nobody will see me, I'll do it. And then actually it transpires. It was not so secret, and people can know about it. And then what? And then all the rest is just history, because then your judgment has been suspended. You haven't thought about alternative ways. You find yourself with all kinds of records. You don't need to build a career. So never to give up on your judgment, and you give up your judgment every possible thoughtful moment that you have to think through it. It's better to go to a teacher, to an instructor, and say, look, I can't finish it on this deadline. Really, I can't. And most probably you will get your time. But don't find shortcuts, and invest in what you do. Hard work is essential, and whatever it is. Even my stamp collection, and don't take it as an example, and not, because stamps don't say anything to any more people with the emails around. But even with stamp collection, once I was into it, it becomes really something that definitely demanded me to be disciplined in how I organize my collection. What do I put together? Do I go through it by country, by language, by region, by thematics, by whatnot? And that was an exercise on the world even before I was able to go out of my community. And for me, all I can say, it was an arbitrary encounter with a person that was 4 times my age, was living on the floor above us, who just had stamps and felt that they want to pass them on because they're going to pass at some point. And they gave me a few things to start with. And I took it because that was the only thing I had. And till today, I never regretted it. And I can say that person, I even forgot their family name, was my best instructor, if you want to put it this way. So don't give up on things that look insignificant in the here and now, then you lose opportunities to build up. Thank you so much. So.
Well, thank you all so much. This is now the end of the discussion panel. I would like to invite everyone to come outside into the main area for our networking section. There's snacks and refreshments. Thank you all so much for coming. And for those of us online, thank you all so much for joining. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to our speakers by email. I think you guys provided email. Yeah, by email. And thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm a master student in GSS.
Yes, of course, I've seen it. I tried to signal yesterday. I fully do. You do it. See you again.
Let's take a group.
Oh, okay. The family. Did the family?
Yes. And now together.
One, two, three. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Things here. Yeah.
Well. Yeah.
Oh, I'm just over.
Vivian says that if you can play some music. Yeah, sure. Thanks.